Good day and welcome to the 87th session of the Global Market Encounter with Jim Fitzpatrick. The session is available in French and English. You can access your preferred language via the globe icon on the bottom right side of your screen. We are streaming live on the ACA Facebook page and on the ACA YouTube channel, where you could also find the recordings of the past 86 sessions. Remember that as the session goes on, you can ask questions and leave comments in the discussion box right below. And as usual, we are grateful for our partners and sponsors that are making this webinar possible. I would like to acknowledge the European Union, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, the GIZ MoveCom Cashew Project, the Sustainable Nut Initiative, and the Cashew Club. Be also reminded that we are 62 days to the ACA Annual Cashew Conference and Expo, and for the 19th time, from November 18th to 21st of this year in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, we are going to discuss around the theme Unlocking Cashew Investment Opportunities for Sustainable Economic Growth. Registration is still ongoing with early bird rates ending September 30th. You can visit our website and register now. Back to today, we are gathering to discuss cashew markets, and the cashew season is ongoing in East Africa. Last 2 weeks, we looked at Tanzania, but this week we are focusing on Mozambique. And to do so, we have two amazing guests, Lucia Antonio Sebastio from the Institutes of Nuts of Mozambique and Gonzalo Correira from the Condor Nuts. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Stella. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks very much. Good
We
morning,
are ready
everyone.
for
You're
you.
welcome. Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to our Mozambique special. So we're going to talk about what's happening in Mozambique. And as Stella mentioned, we have two really good guests to keep us informed on developments this season in Mozambique. As usual, we're going to start today with a little bit of a discussion on the market. I have a quick update on cashew news and policy, but I don't want to go too much into that this week. It's relatively quiet. I want to spend most of the time focusing on Mozambique. So this is a time of year when there are many rumors on demand, on policy, on the weather, on production in the Southern Hemisphere. It really is important to understand what's happening and what to expect next, which is why we decided to focus on Mozambique this week. And we're joined by our two guests. Mozambique, as you know, is becoming more and more important as a producer and is going through something of a rebirth in processing, I think. Lucia and Gonzalo will tell us more about that in a little while. But before we come to them, let's have a look at the market situation. So I'm just titling this week's market discussion, Buy on Rumor, Sell on Fact. So that's, if you're a trader, you've heard that before. It's very common in the trading world, especially in volatile markets. And what it means really is that information and speculation drive price movements. It's based on the concept of acting on the market expectations rather than on the actual events or announcements. So in this situation, you often find that the market moves in unexpected ways. Is that going to happen now? Well, on the bearish side, what could press prices lower? Well, there's large crops expected in East Africa. There are some balances in West Africa. The Indian rupee is a little bit weak. India imports about 60% of the cashews it processes, so it means a lot if the Indian rupee is weak. We have, as we know, relatively weak demand for natural cashews from the United States for two reasons. One is the huge import last year, and the other is, of course, the tariffs. And finally, we have economic concerns, a little bit longer term perhaps, but there we're talking about what may happen as tariffs bite in the United States, particularly, and what might be the longer term economic impact of those tariffs across the world. Seems like there's quite a lot of arguments for lower prices, but there are also some very strong arguments for higher prices, or at least stable prices. So we have very strong export figures from Vietnam. Demand is unreal. I'm going to talk about that shortly, but it is remarkable how strong demand has been this year in the face of 30% higher prices, US tariffs, reduced demand in the US, and so much uncertainty around the world, both economic and political. There are also rumors of reduced tariffs. That's reduced US tariffs, of course. And those have had some kind of an impact amongst the chattering speculative actors in our business over the last 10 days or so. What's going on in India? Very good imports of raw cashew nuts. There must be significant confidence in demand in India. We'll have a look at that too. And of course, finally, steady prices for other tree nuts, which is a major factor in making decisions and definitely in creating the sentiment in the market. Let's have a closer look at some of the factors. So if we look at cashew kernels prices, Vietnam is strong, but strong on rumor. Remember what I said, buy the rumor, sell the fact. Africa is pretty much well sold, I think, at premium prices. We see prices a little bit higher over the last 2 weeks since we were with you last. Depending on what way you look at it, that could be anywhere from 5 to 15 cents a pound, depending on who you buy, what you buy, and where you buy it. In Africa, it's relatively steady, premium prices still being maintained. I think it looks as if that is a fixture in the market now. There are many inquiries. There's a little bit of buying from Western countries, from Europe and the United States, relatively modest. It is a time of year when many people start to review their cover. They come back, particularly in Europe and the US, they come back after the summer. The busy season is long started. They have a look at what's been going on and they say, what do we need for the rest of this year, which is usually not much. And then they review their cover for Q1 and Q2 of next year. So they want to particularly get through to Northern Hemisphere new crop without breaking their budgets, obviously without running out of product. And they want to get into a situation where they're comfortable with what may happen next year, but also they want to manage their risk. More buying from China, big factor in the market. And it looks like, well, it's certain we're going to have record imports to China this year. And it looks like we may have the start of a real strong development in Chinese demand. And finally, inquiries from India for brokens. Yes, for broken cashew kernels. I don't know how those importers are managing to import with all those high import duties. Various people have their theories. But what I can say is that a lot of people are looking to buy brokens which they want to ship to India. How that works in India? Well, we don't know. Let's have a look at RCN prices. Indonesia's now in the frame. Prices started at relatively high levels, similar to Guinea-Bissau. Generally speaking, the RCN market is pretty steady. Large imports to Vietnam. Some people say that that material is unsold. Some people say it's in warehouses. I can't see how that works, but there you are. Traders are definitely, and I mean RCN traders, definitely pushing to offload some of their stocks. There's a lot of chat in the market, and it mostly seems to be directed toward the project of selling whatever RCN from West Africa is left and making a start on East Africa. Mixed signals from India. India's imports have been very strong. Is it in expectation of a weaker rupee? Is it in expectation of excellent demand? Difficult to work out, but the picture is becoming clearer, and there are still some unsold stocks in Africa. Not too much, not as much as we might have expected, but there are still some there. Cote d'Ivoire, for example, CCA has bought up a lot of stock, and I guess that will come out into the market one way or the other. It'll come out this year, or it'll be reinvented and come out next year as new crop. We shall see. Steady prices all around. I've said there were bearish factors and bullish factors. It looks to me as if this market is relatively well balanced. I don't really see any major reason for it to be volatile either direction. Have a look at Vietnam, and this situation is quite surprising if we go back 6, 8 months ago and we think about what might have happened. We're looking at January to August imports, the highest January to August imports on record. There's a surprise. We're looking at the January to August exports. Again, the highest on record. Just about now, exports from Vietnam of cashew kernels have surpassed last year. And if you look at that chart, let's have a quick look at that chart. Look at this chart. I mean, who could have expected in 2020, in the midst of COVID, when we saw exports really strong, that only 6 years later, we'd be at nearly 500,000 tons. This is remarkable. We should take great confidence from this development in the market. So when we look at it, and I mean, I tried to calculate what's left in terms of stock. If we look this year, we probably had a lower opening stock in Vietnam. We had a lowish crop. We've had high import, but we've also had high export. And if you calculate all of that, what's officially in the books, so it's material that hasn't been cleared at customs, material afloat is not included. It looks like it's only about 40 days processing stock. That's too tight. That's remarkably tight. And we can say that the net stocks have fallen in the last 2 months. So it seems likely that demand for raw cashew nuts from Vietnam will keep coming. How Vietnamese buyers will react to these slightly higher prices, to the high quality that they can expect from Indonesia or from Tanzania, remains to be seen. But they probably need to buy more. Let's have a look at the Indian situation. And we saw a really remarkable situation in July. Look at that monthly chart. So when we look, the red bars, monthly imports 2025, January, February, March, all the way through to July, the latest numbers we have, and compare them to previous years. And when we look at that, again, this is quite remarkable. We're looking at a record July import, but not just a record. As you can see, it's, well, literally, as the cliche goes, almost off the chart. So in India, this looks like there's great confidence. It looks like there's great confidence in what's to come. Or does it? January, July imports up by 29%. Numbers are looking like 2022 when 1.3 million plus tons was imported. Could be real confidence in demand for the rest of the year. And I think there'd be good reason for that. I remember visiting India early this year at the Mewa dried fruit and nut conference, which was a great event, by the way. And I got the feeling then that there was a real boom in Indian demand for dried fruits and nuts on the way. Maybe that's happened. We also have a couple of other factors. We have the GST, so there's the reforms reduction in the sales tax is about to hit. Are people speculating ahead of that? Possibly. We know that Indian importers and traders like to speculate on raw cashew nuts. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Or is it a speculation based on an expected fall in the value of the rupee. I'm not sure about that because although it is forecast that the rupee will drift lower, it's not really sure by how much that will happen. And I would be a little bit concerned if that's the reason. But we know imports are really good. We know July was a big number. I think we could expect August not to be such a healthy number as a result. At the end of June, well, or with the end of June figures, we were saying imports should be something like 1.1 to 1.2 million tons, a little bit like last year. Looking at this, well, it seems on what we know now that it's likely to exceed that significantly. Generally speaking, it looks healthy. I think that demand is good in India, but I also think that these two factors, the two technical or financial or speculative factors, are likely to also impact the market. And we may not see the 2022 figure, but we might see something better than 1.2 million tons. Let's remember, in 2022, the record import led to a huge carry-out stock. It wasn't based on demand, it was based on speculation. Let's hope that doesn't happen again. What about demand for kernels? So the most accessible, up-to-date measure of indicators of demand worldwide is the Vietnam export figures for cashew kernels. So these are the Vietnamese export figures for cashew kernels for the regions, the 5 regions. This is my version of how you do it. What I do is I take China, US and Canada together, top 10 in Europe, top 6 in West Asia. So that includes the Gulf states, the Middle East, countries like the Lebanon, and then East and Central Asia. So this would be Japan, Korea, countries throughout Asia, but excluding China, which is already here. Look at the numbers for China. 32%. This is shipments from Vietnam to China in 2025 are up by 32%. And if you just compare, so we're looking at 2023 in blue, 2024 in orange, and the recent 2025 figures in the grey colour, 108,000 tonnes so far this year versus about 58,000 tonnes back in 2023, almost double. That's amazing. And we are in the midst of a relatively busy period as we go through September. More demand is likely to come. US and Canada, though, tells a different story. Combined down by 28%. Most of that is, of course, US. And there we have a figure which, you look at it compared to last year, which let's remember was a real boom year. US imports were through the roof last year, probably to avoid tariffs or at least to build inventories ahead of tariffs. It looks pretty bad compared to last year, but not compared to the year before. So in the year before, 113,000 tonnes by the end of August. This year, 104. By no means disastrous, but does look poor compared to last year. Also, and not included in these figures, is the import of processed, bulk roasted, consumer packs, cashews into the United States. This has been moving up and up. It was about 45,000 tonnes last year, and it is becoming more and more significant. I don't add those in there because I want to make the comparison across the 5 regions. But if we were to add them in there, this minus 28 would notch down to about minus 11%. Imports of processed cashews from Vietnam to the United States are more and more significant in recent years. I think they're growing at, I think the rate is about 15% every year. Europe, mature market, steady growth, actually quite resilient. Not a great deal of impact of the higher prices that we're seeing this year in the European market. This is the top 10, mostly European Union countries, but also I add in Norway, I add in Switzerland in order just to give it a little bit of a flavour of outside, and the UK. Pretty strong, about 3% up, healthy. That's what we expect in Europe. Steady growth year on year, Long may it continue. West Asia, this is the Middle Eastern countries mainly, up by 37%. And this is pretty astounding growth, actually. Now, there may be more to this than meets the eye, but it is very positive. And then Eastern Central Asia, a little bit down, not too surprising there. The 2025 figure is better than 2023, but less than last year. We'll see at the end of the year how that works out. But certainly in those markets, it might be the impact of higher prices. And let's not forget, prices this year at the current rates are something like 28% higher than they were a year ago. Tends to impact more quickly in markets that do not buy forward than it would in markets which buy forward, like the European market. Positive news on cashew kernel demand just about everywhere. Let's have a look then at some of the news and some of the policy updates and some of the stories around cashews. We'll start, as we like to, in Africa. So what are we hearing? So Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, is still, crop looks around about 1.5 million tons to me. If you told me it was 1.4, I wouldn't necessarily argue too hard on that, but it's in that region. 100,000 tons left, processing volume strong, processors doing well, particularly in the European market. But I also notice, looking at US figures, there is something of a little recovery there over the last couple of months. Earlier in the year, we saw imports from African countries, particularly Cote d'Ivoire, to the US down, and they have recovered somewhat in the latter part of the year. So that's quite an interesting development. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the year. Guinea-Bissau looks to me steady. There's not a great deal of news. Prices being maintained. Looks like an excellent crop. I've mentioned many times that the return of the cross-border trade with Senegal is not a healthy development, and it is something that needs to be managed a little bit better, hopefully someday by cooperation between the countries. Benin, okay, the ban on raw cashew nut exports is really being questioned now. The impact of banning raw cashew nut exports should be, you would imagine, positive for processors and possibly negative for farmers. If you don't enforce it, or if you can't, or if you're looking at a situation where the sheer logistics and the sheer volumes don't allow you to enforce it, you're in trouble. And it seems to me that this is really being questioned, and I understand it's being questioned in Benin as well as outside. Tanzania, well, we talked about Tanzania 2 weeks ago with the cashew board and with coastal nuts. Crop still looks good. It has drifted a little bit later. I don't think that means a great deal. The auction would be scheduled for the end of October. Processors still and should have 5-6 weeks access to buy at least some of the material they need in between. So still looks good. Mozambique, well, we're going to hear a lot about Mozambique shortly. What else is there? Well, Nigeria. So I'm really surprised that there seems to be a campaign to control, even ban the export of raw cashew nuts. Farmers are really unhappy about this. And this argument has gone public. You can read it in the media. And it is in my opinion, one of the most surprising developments. Not that processors would campaign for their own advantage and profit, but that they would be considered, given that Nigeria really doesn't have a developed policy on cashews, not in the way that Cote d'Ivoire has, or Benin has, or Tanzania has. Where does this come from? It looks like, I mean, it's interesting to see private sector players in this industry publicly trying to influence policy. That is actually a healthy development. But how would it work? How would a ban, how would a window work? Given the flow of raw cashew nuts from Benin into Nigeria, given the diverse, almost scattered production of cashews in Nigeria, given the reliance on exports, given the slow process of getting your raw cashew nuts through the ports in Nigeria, how would this work? It's, if you control it, if you create a window, it means everything arrives through the port at once. How would that look in terms of logistics? Probably farmer prices go lower. That's been generally the impact. Even if you set a minimum price, we've seen it's so difficult to control that generally farmers are worse off when bans come into play. I'm really surprised at this. I don't think it's a great idea. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. It's not the answer to problems that processors have. The answer to problems that processors have is to develop their supply chain and develop their marketing, improve the management of the business, not to ask the government to come and bail out some major company that's failed to manage their own business properly. And in Ghana, again, a little bit of a surprising story. The only major processor in the country has published a note in the news media saying that they might move to Cote d'Ivoire. That would be after, I think, 11 years processing in Ghana. Why now, when it's better than it was before? Why move to Cote d'Ivoire anyway, just as the subsidies are being phased out? Strange story. I'm not sure if it's true, but again, I think what we're seeing is private companies seeking to influence policy and doing so in a rather clumsy way, if I may say so. What else? Well, let's have a look at this rumor that the export or the import tariff from cashews or other agricultural products from Vietnam to the United States will be reduced. There is a provision that if a trade deal, if a reciprocal trade deal, as the Americans call it, is reached, certain agricultural products, and this would include cashew nuts, would be exempt from import tariffs. That would be really good news for our business, of course. It's not new. The Vietnamese government on the 12th of April issued a negotiation which included this, and it included certain agricultural products. So if you look at these agricultural products, things like coffee, cashews, are not grown in the United States and important to American consumers, particularly the coffee, of course. So this is part of ongoing trade negotiations. They've been going on for a long time. To a certain extent, the US still sees Vietnam as a backdoor for Chinese products. I'm not sure how accurate that is. It's certainly been true in the past. And what we're looking at now is a situation where, as part of a trade deal, there could be something new. I think also in this discussion, what we have to say is that there are signs in the United States of the impact or negative impact of tariffs, consumer inflation, particularly food inflation, jobless claims higher. Just reading some of the Reuters is a good source for some of this information on economics. But the stock market keeps going up. So you've got a weaker dollar, a higher stock market, increasing inflation, particularly for food, and increasing unemployment. This is quite a mix, and this could lead to an economic slowdown. Many people are predicting that that will happen, and they're going to reduce interest rates, which might even increase the likelihood of that happening. We'll see. What's changed since April? Nothing. This is just rumor. Until this is fact, it means nothing. It's caused a mini spike in trade in Vietnam. The negotiation's been going on since April. The White House statement was reissued recently, but otherwise the situation hasn't changed. So until Vietnam and the United States conduct final trade negotiations, this is not going to happen. Will this mean that cashew kernels go to the United States at 0% duty in the next weeks or months? To me, it seems highly unlikely. This is a complex issue. It will take time. And I think the reaction of the market to this is really breathtaking. And do not be drawn into buying the rumor. Wait and see what happens. This could end up messy. This could end up with warehouses full of raw cashew nuts that are just overpriced or not needed. So the outlook. Well, the way I'm seeing it at the moment is raw cashew nut stocks are adequate in India, tight in Vietnam, still plenty of business to be done on raw cashew nuts. I think kernels prices look steady. I think the existing trends in demand are enough to keep this market steady. I don't think it's going to take off, but I do think it's worth the current prices. The forward cover for 2026 is being looked at. It's going to gear up again. Looks positive for Europe, still question marks over the United States. Overall steady demand. Southern Hemisphere crops look good. Maybe Tanzania is a little bit later. Not sure what that means, but it probably doesn't matter because the auction will only start toward the end of October anyway. But it matters for processors who are currently sourcing. Demand very strong. If you take the whole picture, US weak, elsewhere steady, some places remarkable. Particularly keep an eye on what's happening in India on demand. India is the biggest market in the world. So we're looking at a situation where reaction to rumor, speculative reaction has caused a little bit of a flurry in raw cashew nut trade. Raw cashew nut prices, there's no real reason based on supply for that market to move up. Maybe some people want to get their material in earlier for Forex reasons. Maybe they're very confident on demand, but there's no real reason based on the available supply for that market to move any higher than it is. In fact, even now, it's a tight calculation to make RCN prices work based on the current value of cashew kernels. And of course, the supply focus now switches, or continues to switch, probably more accurately, to East Africa. And on that subject, let's focus on Mozambique. So let me first of all make sure our guests are with us. Lucia, are you with us? Stella, have you found our guests? Lucia is here, Stella tells me. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Lucia, Antonio, you are very welcome. How are you keeping? Well, let's wait a moment and see if we can get our guests online and talking to us. In the meantime, let's just reflect for a minute. There's been very positive moves in Mozambique in recent years. Production has been growing. It had been forecast to fall due to aging trees and so on, but there's been some interesting developments. I get the feeling that processing in Mozambique is also on the upturn. Let's see if... So maybe we could promote our guests to panelists, and that would help. Isn't Zoom really wonderful? At times it drives you
Good morning,
up
Jim.
the edge. Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really
Oh, thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
Always good to hear you. Always good to hear your views. Always good to hear the perspective from IAM. Everyone, Lucia Antonio is a global food and agribusiness expert from IAM in Mozambique. We've been chatting cashews on and off for some time, and she has a great experience. So what I thought was we'd have a little bit of a chat about what's happening in Mozambique this year and where we're likely to go. I was just saying to everyone that the crop prospects in Mozambique in recent years have been very positive. What's the outlook for the coming harvest season?
Thank you, Jim. Before we starting, I would like to say thank you to ACA and GSA regarding the outlook of this season. I would like to also to share with the panelists and all the guests that last season was a milestone for Mozambique because in the early 1970s, Mozambique was the world largest producer of cashew nut with 200,000 metric tons. So 50 years later, which is mean last season, we reached the historic milestone with result of the market output 200,000 metric tons. So it was a very good season for Mozambique, and with that results give us more hope to continue with investing on cashew research and also the integrated pest management, the intensification of new cashew seedling. So for this season, we start to do our prospecting on the field, but in comparison with last season, this season will open at the end of October, while in the past season we opened it at the end of September. So we have a delay in terms of harvesting, but we are expecting that it's going to be a good season. Just let's hope for the prospectus after more 1 month we can come together and just talk about the figures, because last season we reached 200,000 metric tons. Let's hope with the prospect that we've been doing on the field, we're gonna increase.
And what's keeping the crop or making the crop a little bit later this year?
Let's talk about climate change. Yes, it's notable. We are following Tanzania as well. It seems that they will gonna be a delay in Tanzania. So as we are neighbor country with the same climate, this is affecting us. Most interestingly, Jim, is for the district that already started with harvesting last season. Now we are observing a delay, while for some province which have been started later, we are observing a yearly harvesting. So this is the effect of the climate change.
It's remarkable, isn't it, that this has come on us so quickly, really, because we've been talking about it for some years, but it's really having an impact now in so many places. What about in the longer term? Do you expect this positive growth in production to continue?
Yes, exactly, Jim. We have working on our project of cashew development in Mozambique. And I will talk for the short term. In the next 5 years, our main goals is to increase the production, productivity, and quality from 200,000 metric ton. We want to double this production for nearly 400,000 metric ton. We also want to expand and improve the capacity of technical assistance, because nowadays we are reaching only 200,000 direct farmers. So we want to reach in the next 5 years more than 800,000 farmers, cashew farmers. So by doing that, we will be able to leverage the cashew production and quality in Mozambique. It's also by increasing the production and the quality, We will also be able to revitalization of the national processing factory from above 100,000 metric tons, because we are working with the low figure on the processing. So due to a lower of production and quality, so by this major investment in work that we have been done for the next 5 and 10 years, we are expecting a leverage on production.
So this is remarkable. I mean, for so many years we had heard stories that aging trees, that production would fall, but that trend has been totally turned around. How did that happen? What were the main factors in ensuring that production increased rather than, as many predicted 10 years ago, would start to fall?
Exactly. Thank you, Jim. As we know, Mozambique is aging of cashew tree. We have 38 million cashew tree, and the major ages are old, and we have a recurring disease and outbreaks. So the government has started 20 years ago with the program called the intensification of production and plantation of new cashew seedlings. So we leverage the cashew seedlings for nearly 5 million cashew seedlings per year. We start to planting. So nowadays we start to observing the results. Regarding to recurring disease outbreak, we have the program called the Integrated Pest Management. So it's important in Mozambique, and this program normally start in May. We start with spraying program along the province, the province, and this also contributes to leverage the production, to lower the disease, and to have the good quality of raw cashew nuts.
It's quite remarkable. I mean, some of the numbers, 800,000 farmers, 38 million trees. This is a big task. It really
Yes.
is.
Yes, it is.
What about processing? I know, talking to some of the processors, that they have had some difficult years. What's the current situation on processing?
Yes, indeed. In processing, we are facing difficulties related mostly with financing, but I will talk about some evolution. We have two new unities or large-scale processor entering. On 2023, we were working with 7 unities, but now we are counting 8 unities. In 2023, we export the kernel export where we reached 6,000 metric tons, but in 2024 we reached 12,000 metric tons. We know that we still a long way to go. We have more than 7 unities that are not operational. So we are also using this platform to call it and to invite investors to work in Mozambique. As we are working to leverage the production, we will be able also to have a quality and good quality of raw cashew nut for the processor. It's important to say, Jim, that we have primary processing in Mozambique, but we also have a secondary processing. The secondary processing are those small unities. They're not doing only the white kernels processing, but they are adding value. And those segments we are assisting a huge increasing, because they are processing and adding value with kernel with different flavors. 2 small unities. The example is Sunshine Company is exporting the value-added kernels to the United States, and is also exporting. Now want to enter in China. Because we have a memorandum of agreement with China to export kernels, macadamia, and also raw cashew nut. So it's a segment that is being growing. Just to give an example, 5 years ago we have only 10 unities, And in last year, we have increased, we have assist 21 units of small scale units that are adding value. So that's a segment to work on it. And we are seeing also the evolution on packaging. We are seeing the evolution on certification. So they are not only sell domestically, but they are exported to the neighbor countries such as South Africa and Botswana, Swaziland, and other neighbor countries.
The secondary processing development is quite exciting, particularly when you think of the potential in markets like China, for example. Um, what about, I mean, we did see a spike in the export of Burma kernels for some time, which I always thought was, it happened in many African countries, but I always found it disappointing. You introduced a tax. Is that in place? And has it had an impact?
Yes, we have introduced not import tax on Burma kernels, but also on the raw cashew nut. But I would like to share with you that, interestingly, we have to start with this new tax last season. However, because we have the new law, but we didn't update yet the new regulation. So in order to avoid the clashes between the stakeholders, we step in and we work on the new regulation, and this regulation will be approved, will be sent for the Minister Council, and then we will be able to introduce on the next season. We have assisted that the unity, the factors that have export Burma kernels, when they saw this new tax, they also start to invest on the lines to adding value of raw cashew nut. So you are seeing now the Burma kernels factories now also doing the primary processing. They know that because by exporting kernels there is no tax, but if you export a Burma kernel next season, there will be a tax of 15% on it.
Interesting. It is interesting too. I mean, the response to difficulties in a business should really be to add more value, not less. But that's a difficult thing to do. And hopefully, this tax has given the incentive to people to invest and develop their business in that sense. I think it's exciting to see more secondary processing. I think it's exciting to see Burma kernels exporters moving toward natural kernels, all very positive. Um, what about the coming season, particularly with the focus on RCN export? Are there likely to be any changes in the regulation? You've mentioned the season will start a month later. Any other changes in tax or other laws?
Oh, we didn't implement the regulation, so the next season we will work with the new tax, like 22% of raw cashew nut export and on Burma. For kernels, we have zero tax. For export kernels is zero tax. And then we also update our regulation regarding the registration of the actors, reducing the bureaucracy when it comes to purchase or buying cashew on the field. So the regulation aims to respond to market dynamics in order that we have a transparency during the system of commercialization. But above, a part of talking about new regulation, new role, there is a chapter which is very, very important, is the areas of cooperation. I will give you example, sir. Tanzania and Mozambique are neighbor countries, and we have same climates, we have same challenge, but apart from the 20 years, we have been working separately. So we are working now in areas of strengthening our cooperation and collaboration. And we start last season by doing a memorandum of agreement to strengthen the research program of development in order to increase production, productivity, and have new variety of cashew. Because we have discussing on the base, but our government, the president of Mozambique and the president of Tanzania has come together and instruct us to work together in order to leverage cashew production and productivity in East Africa. So I'm gonna give example. Last year or last season, Tanzania has reached 500,000 metric ton, and Mozambique 200,000 metric ton. Joined together is nearly 700 metric tons. But Tanzania has a specific advantages when we talk about the quality. Tanzania is talking about 48 and 53 quality of raw cashew nut, while we are talking about 46. So Mozambique need to catch up with Tanzania regarding to these issues. And I'm going to give you an example of the areas of cooperation that we have been working with Tanzania so that we can leverage our cashew value chain. We want also in the memorandum of agreement to enhance the cashew marketing system. We want also to improve the cashew quality control and standards, because we have been assisting also the smuggling of raw cashew nut across the borders. So we want to develop a legal framework to control raw cashew nut across the borders of Tanzania and Mozambique. We want sharing market information, and both of the countries want to transfer technology on production, on marketing, on processing, and both countries want it attract investment, because we assist in how West African Sega B, the movement of Sega B is working in West Africa, and we want to replicate some good examples to East African. So we have a competitive advantage. We start early with the production. When West African is closed, Mozambique and Tanzania is starting. Why? We need to take advantage of that. And we have the good quality, good climate to expand our cashew production and leverage also the quality. And by doing that, to adding value on our cashew byproducts. And the strengthening of cooperation, collaboration with Tanzanians is being worded by the two countries, and hopefully, I hope we can sign the memorandum of agreement in November at ACAF conferences by the two institution. We hope to sign this memorandum. We are working together, and it's very much exciting to have this kind of paper, and we are excited to operationalize all the contents that we have on the memorandum of agreement. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That is really good news. It's timely, I think, too, as the production in both countries is rising. There's a couple of things from what you said, Lucia, that occurred to me. First of all, that the proportion of the crop produced during this period, September to January, is only about 17% of the world crop. Having your crop in that period is definitely a competitive advantage. I think also there's a second competitive advantage emerging now. We're seeing more and more the consumption of cashew products move from west to east. So we see growth in markets in the east, and we've seen that in India for 20 years. But we are seeing it now in China, we're seeing it in other countries throughout the region, and being more accessible to that region with cashew kernels is definitely going to be a competitive advantage in the future. I do hope you sign that memorandum at the African Cashew Alliance conference in November in Dar es Salaam. That would be a real landmark. But let's, Gonzalo Correa has not joined us yet. I guess he's got some technical issues. But so let's go back to Stella and see if there are some questions for Lucia arising from our discussion this morning so far. Stella.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you, Lucia, for being with us this morning. Yes, I have two questions here for Lucia. The first one is with relations to climate change that she spoke about and the effect she is having on the harvest time. So the question is, how has this climate change been managed by processors, given that the raw cashew nut will not come as it was planned? And how has this also affected exports? Lucia?
Yes, can I respond now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Stella. Thank you, Jim. We have seen the climate change effects delaying the production, and I gave an example, and I want to clarify that this change is when we talk about the harvesting is going to be at the end of October, is not a bigger change because in last season the harvest started at the end of September, and the official commercialization we start at October. So there is no bigger change when we talk about. But for the research, it's very important to pay attention because we are assisting the district, some district that were having early production. Nowadays, they will have later production. So it's important for the research to step in and study how we can expand for another region. This will not affect the exports, no, will not affect at all. I ensure that. But it's very important for the research team start to analyze the effect of the climate change on our production.
Thank you very much, Lucia. The other question is regarding the export tax on the raw cashew nuts. How much is it for the 2025-2026 session?
I will talk about the last season because last season Mozambique has exported 81,000 metric tons. It was one of the highest figures in the past 20 years. And the projection for export, we need to have first the prospectus of production. When we have the prospect of production in Mozambique, we have a cashew committee when we sit with the processor, exporters, and farmers, and we have our plan. And with the plan, we receive information for the exporter, what they are planning to export. We receive also the plan for processor, what they are the plan for acquiring the raw cashew nut. So it's very important first as an institution, as a regulatory institution, that we first have the prospect of production. Then we will come with export. But I can assure that for this season, the export probably the official export we will open at the beginning of December. But I will not talk about the figures because it's early to talk about the figures now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. We have a last question for you. What will be the key markets for Mozambique in the future?
Oh, that's very interesting. The key markets for Mozambique in the future. we have followed Jim, and we have assisted that China is a new target market. So it's important that as a Mozambique we start to be organized. But most importantly, when regarding to kernels, we are not seeing the Emirates, but we are seeing Africa has a huge hub for kernels, because we have South Africa, we have Namibia, we have Morocco's, we have countries that are eager to buy kernels, and they are interact with us. So at the same with Tanzania, we have our neighbor Zambia, we have Zimbabwe, and it's a target market for us. Not only focus on European market, but also focus on our neighbor country. Even the domestic market is important, but if we want to grow faster, we have to look at China, we have to look at the Emirates, we have to look at our neighbor countries like South Africa, like Namibia. It's very important because Africa is huge, and we have to start to do marketing internally as well. Because in the past year, we just focus externally. We go for China, for Asia, we go to Europe, you go to United States, but United States now has tariffs that we can, and we have to be open, not to think only with one basket, but we see the growth of consumption in Africa. And we also want to target this market. And the language the mutual relationship will facilitate our trades. We have a trade, IFCT trade, and for African hubs to export our Mozambican products. And yes, we want to also to target African markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Please stay with us. There is a question to Jim, but I'm sure Lucia's input will be very much welcome. Jim, regarding the situation in India, given the recent mixed signals from India, particularly around demand volatility and the current risk, how are Mozambican exporters adjusting their strategy to maintain stability, but also competitiveness in such an unpredictable market?
Well, I think that first of all, let's just think about India a little bit. What we're talking about is not uncertainty in terms of Indian demand for this year. What we're talking about is uncertainty in terms of timing. So what we're talking about is 800,000 plus tons imported already. Is that a trend that will be continued throughout the year? In which case we could end up with a figure like 2022, 1.3 plus million tons. Or is it that the original figure expected between 1.1 and 1.2 million tons is just coming in a little bit earlier? And if it's coming earlier, is that because of concerns on the development of the foreign exchange rate, US dollar to Indian rupee? These are two aspects. There are other aspects for India. The value and the import of other tree nuts. India is a big importer of almonds, for example. Almond prices are firm. The trade is somewhat disrupted. Pistachio nuts prices are also very firm, and India is an importer of those too. I would imagine that exporters in Mozambique will be closely watching the situation in India. If the Tanzanian harvest starts a little bit late, and Tanzanian raw cashew nuts are very much valued in India for their quality, then that will mean that the overall availability will be pushed a little bit later. So exporters in Mozambique might be expecting that their own export, Lucia has mentioned December, that their own export would start possibly a little bit later than last year. But don't forget, we also have regulations in Mozambique so that processors have the right to source what they need in the early part of the season. So right now, I don't think that exporters in Mozambique will be doing too much. They're probably likely to be tempted to start their prices higher than they might otherwise have done, based on recent weeks. I'm not sure if that's sustainable, but I think it is likely to be a fact. We've seen a little rise in prices over the last 10 days, but we haven't seen a great deal of trade. Personally, I don't think prices much higher than today's level are sustainable, but it is possible. And I want to remind everyone of last year when the auction started in Tanzania. We kind of got ourselves into a mini speculative bubble. Prices started extremely high and they proved to be unsustainable. Prices rapidly fell during the auction. And of course, some people sadly lost some money speculating on that. So again, I think I would advise a very cautious approach. I would say it's not a time for speculation. If you buy it, if you can export it, do so. But I wouldn't be thinking now either to be selling short, nor would I be thinking to fill up my warehouses with raw cashew nuts in anticipation of higher prices later on. In my opinion, uncertainty should lead to more conservative trading strategies, not to more aggressive speculation. Not an easy market to read right now. We need to be careful in it. Stella.
Thank you, Jim. Lucia, would you like to add up?
Yes, I agree with Jim, but it's also important that we can share that we are working with the Vinacas Association in terms of we finished the memorandum of understanding, and it may be signed next month it at Hanoi for the mutual benefits regarding to export of raw cashew nut, and not only export raw cashew nut, most important set up factories in Mozambique, and also transference of technology regarding maintenance of factories and training our technician in Vietnam. The memorandum of understanding, it's also be important to strengthen the collaboration and facilitate the mutual trading regarding to commercialization and marketing of raw cashew nut, processing, and also export of kernels to Vietnam. Sharing information. It's also important to sharing information because Vietnam has been exporting raw cashew nut and Burma kernels, but it's difficult to have clear information regarding what is being traded to Vietnam. With this memorandum of understanding, we agree to come together and share market information with transparency. This memorandum, it will be signed probably next month at Hanoi in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. There is a question in the box. I've seen you've answered it, but let's ask it out loud for the others. It's related to pest and disease. What is the effect of pest and diseases on the cashew crop yields in Mozambique for this year, 2025?
I will not answer just for the year 2025 because it's the program that started in the past 20 years. So we have this recurring disease and pest outbreak, Shasta mildew powder. We have anthracnose, and the government has set this program to leverage production and improve the quality. Just to give an example, one cashew tree, when it's not treated, can produce 3 kilos. But if you treat the cashew tree, it will produce 12 kilos. So you can see the gap here of difference. That's why as we have aging of cashew trees, and we have the recurring pest and disease outbreaks at national level. We have the program called the spraying program of the cashew tree, and we start in May and we finish in September. So we are finished now, and our plan is to treat more than 10 million cashew tree. So 10 million cashew tree, if one tree produce 12 kilos, we have 120,000 metric ton, 120,000 metric tons. So it's just to see the huge importance of treating the cashew tree. So the program is working, and is a program that we are doing with farmers. Farmers have been bought the equipment, have been having training. We have service providers that we are working on the field. And at the end of September next week, we'll come together with the new figures, with the final figures to compare with our plan if we reach the 10 millions of cashew trees that we are planning or not. So at the end of March, we will come to respond, but so far we are doing a good job on the fields.
Thank you very much, Lucia. We are so appreciative for how detailed your answer has been. Please stay with us while we have Gonzalo. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Stella. Isn't it interesting how Mozambique is making cooperations with Vinacas, that the government has made a cooperation with China, and that there's an opportunity for an MOU with Tanzania? These kind of cooperations are really positive. Well, let's go to Gonzalo. Good morning, Gonzalo. How are you?
Hi, Jim. I'm doing very well. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today.
No, it's a pleasure.
It's great to have you on. And
Okay, thank you.
can you tell us a little bit about Permanuts? I didn't mention this earlier. Just tell us a little bit about the business.
Yeah, so Permanent is, I think that people can relate much better to the name Condor than Permanent. Permanent is, I would say, the new company that got out of Condor after the turmoil that we lived in 1718. As we all know, there was a big market dip in 17 and 18, both in terms of kernel prices and raw cashew nut prices. And 6 years in, it's not a secret that we, not just we as Condor back then, but as the whole cashew nut industry, and not only in Mozambique, also in Vietnam and other places in Africa and India, had a couple of very rough years. And again, Permanent is a primary cashew nut processor that was born out of one of the assets that belonged to Condor. That was a very old and traditional cashew nut processor in Mozambique. So our business model kind of remains unchanged, although we've invested heavily over the last couple of years now, in new machinery and trying to reduce the costs and trying to basically update ourselves to remain competitive with the powerhouses of processing in the world.
And it looks good. Is this, after a few difficult years, is this light at the end of the tunnel?
I think specifically for us, I would divide this question. I always have two hats, Jim, as I've said. I'm the MD for Permanent or Permacashews, as we call it locally, but I'm also the industry association lead. So I would tend to divide this in two different buckets. I think that for Permanent, yes, it's light at the end of the tunnel. We've come a long way in terms of understanding how to mitigate risks between raw cashew nut inventories and kernel prices. It's not a magic potion that we drank, but it's basically try to walk towards more back-to-back business, meaning that as soon as we have a good indication of the prices of the raw cashew nut, we try to place a large majority of the product of this raw cashew nut, so kernel, obviously. And this has allowed us, not just this, obviously, investment in new machinery and also fresh equity coming in, but this has allowed us basically to secure a year-on-year margin that will never, I think, be what it has been back in the day in terms of very high margins, because we were not only making a margin on the processing but also on the trading of raw cashew that then would materialize through the sales of kernel at the higher price of the two commodities. If you can understand what I mean.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but we, one of the big things was, and this is not new, I've talked to extensively about this, but it's to architect our business into back-to-back business, better clients that truly speak about partnerships. I'm a businessman. I'm always wary of the word partnership, but we've been very lucky. And I think that we did our part as well over the last couple of years in trying to find, specific companies, not private label, that, we cater for a premium business, for a premium market, quality market that, year on year, they've just been growing the volumes it does. And quite honestly, we don't have enough kernel to supply them. So that's actually a good thing. Although
That is a good
that we've
sign.
seen. Yeah. So for us, I think it's light at the end of the tunnel. For the Mozambican industry, I think it's a different story. I would divide it between us and obviously ETG, which is well known to everyone. They're able to, they've done a good work as well, but they're obviously able to absorb the shocks of the commodity behavior, and kind of expurgate that and just keep going. But the rest of the industry is basically non-existent as we speak. So if I'm not mistaken, it's just ourselves, ETG. There is a company that works on and off called Agrico, and then a company that also works, I think, on and off and doing a bit of Burma kernels in Nacala called Cien Caju. All the rest is neglectable. Why is this? I think, global trends changing, shifting of processing to West Africa, and obviously Mozambique not being an attractive country to initiate. So it takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of fighting and a lot of resilience to basically survive. And the production has more or less been stable from our perspective. I know that some numbers don't say that, but from our perspective has been more or less stable, while IVC and Benin and Nigeria and all the countries in West Africa have just skyrocketed over the last couple of years.
Sure. So for you, managing risk, improving technology, building relationships, identifying the right clients have really worked. And I must say, I've noticed that in terms of what I hear, that the reputation of permacashews is really, really strong, and has really grown in recent years. And it's really interesting to hear you say you don't have enough kernels to supply the demand. That is a remarkable turnaround in just a few years. But
I hope you're not saying this because I'm a panelist, but thank you. You make me blush, Jim.
Well, I'm not saying it because you're a panelist. I normally say what I think. So.
Okay. Well, good to know.
And apologies to all those people over the years that I've said what I think to. Anyway, but we've heard, okay, so your business is going well. ETG, strong as one would expect, but the rest of the industry and some, maybe Sunshine also doing well. But
Yes,
turmoil.
but that's a secondary roaster. Apologies.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about them. I'm very sympathetic to what they're trying to do, which is very difficult. So it's a different business from the primary processing.
Absolutely. And it's a really interesting project too.
Mm-hmm.
What could the government be doing to address some of the troubles? What could the government do for processors or to stimulate investment in your view?
Oh, it's a difficult question for a public debate, but I think I mean, many things can obviously be done, but I would divide things on two main buckets. I think that the first is more from a policy, behavioral, and overseeing of the industry, meaning that, and this is my feeling as permanent, not necessarily as Icaju, so I must stress that because I don't know if this is the feeling of the others. But despite the policymakers stating that they want industry in country, which obviously it's true because it's cool to see we employ people. We're, I think, a bastion of pride for all the things that you've said, and it's not just me. I mean, it's for the country as a whole. I think that there is always, and again, I'm like you, Jim. I speak what I think. There is always
Good.
a vested interest in supporting exports because exports pay the export tax, and specifically for a state like the Mozambican state that has had a lot of issues over the last couple of years for different issues that doesn't have anything to do with cashew. Obviously, we get to this, or the public system gets to the purchasing season, screaming and eager for cash, to pay salaries, to pay, lights, so on and so forth. So I would say that, on a single phrase would be to really change the mindset from looking at cashew as an export crop that brings forex and also pays an export tax, to something that can be a catalyzing force, for industrialization in a country that doesn't have any kind of interest in the industry. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think about production. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. I don't know if it's exactly true. What is basically produced in IVC and in Guinea-Bissau and in Benin, but here in Mozambique, I mean, we've been stagnant. I hear numbers, 160, 200,000 tons per year, but against facts, there is no arguments. I mean, we look at the numbers. The industry absorbs 30,000 tons. The exports or the export tax for the exports is referenced to 40 or 50,000 tons. So this adds up to 80,000 tons. Well, maybe there is some local consumption. I live in Maputo, so I do eat locally processed cashew, not the ones from the factory. There is some cross trade that doesn't pay export tax, but it cannot be to the amounts of double of what we see going through the formal channels. So I guess that the message here is, let's be honest. Let's talk about the numbers as they are, because that's the first stone to be able to change anything. And Mozambique is a very vast country. It's very large. Like many of these new powerhouses of production is scattered around all country because it's a century-year-old heritage that we have. So it is very difficult to serve all these smallholder farmers and to basically, convince them and attract them to the crop. It's very costly as well. The roads are not good. The planes don't work well. And I think that much can be done still in terms of like promoting the cashew, production as a whole. There is no reason why we've been stagnant or growing, even it's 10% or 20% in the last decade. And the countries in West Africa, they tripled or quadrupled production. The question is, why is this? And I think that this is a question that only the EIM can answer, basically.
Yeah, I think that is the basic fundamental question that does need to be answered in the sector.
Yeah, so if I just can add, I mean, plentiful production.
Please.
After, we can talk a lot about industry and about export tax and about, but there is one thing that must be addressed, which is to have a plentiful production in country, to have 800,000 tons, 1 million tons. I mean, we do have the area, we do have the farmers for that. So why is that not happening? That's the underlying question of all the industry. If the global industry needs another 1,000,000 tons produced or not, that's a different story. But that's not for us in this forum to address, right? Because there is an oversupply, generally speaking, about cashew, I would say. But
Yeah, I think
not
I think that
for us to address that here.
there is room to increase production, and it is likely that in the next 3 to 5 years we will come through this period of oversupply and turn into a deficit supply. So there's an opportunity there. Suffice it to say that for now. Looking maybe a little bit more shorter term factors, how do you see the market developing over the next few months as the crop starts to come in?
Jim, honestly, I've stopped doing those predictions a couple of years ago. I mean, I've not been very successful in predicting, but I think I think that, and let me put this another way. Because of the nature of our business being back to back, I think that I'm a credible source to speak about the market while we're selling, which is basically now we're about to start the season. So between October and November, December, January, I'm active and I'm engaging in negotiations, so on and so forth. But then from January, February, March till now, it's not that I'm impervious to the market. I obviously speak to traders and I, talk to you and listen to your podcasts, so on and so forth. But, I'm not really an active stakeholder on the commercial side of this business. So I always I'm telling you this because I always tend to gauge the market going forward in October or in September of 2024, right? Which is when I last really had an active role in the market. But I honestly think that for 2026, we're going to have slightly lower kernel prices from what we saw in the beginning of last year. So I'm expecting lower raw cashew nut prices and I'm expecting lower kernel prices. Not very significant. It's not. I don't think it's going to come to $3 for the W320, but it's not going to be at the 360 or 350 or 370 or whatever it was when we sold last year in the last quarter of 2024.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that sentiment. I think it's really interesting, and maybe there's something for other processors to listen to in what you're saying, that what's really important is what's happening in our own business rather trying to guess what's going on in the general market. There is a real tendency in our business to speculate. And one message I'm hearing from you, Gonzalo, is that we manage our risk by matching our purchases and our sales. We build our relationships. And for me, that's the way an industrialist should think. So
thanks. I'm an
I get that.
industrialist. I'm not a trader. So
exactly.
I guess yeah.
Yeah. And really, being a trader or a speculator is not really the way to look after the assets and the investment in a business. But you've been, you're a pioneer. Your family are pioneers in the cashew business in Mozambique. You are a pioneer in let's say, the resurgent processing expressed by permanuts. If you could change, just to finish on a light note, if you could change one thing in the business forever, what would that be?
Yeah. Well, just before that, thank you. But I'm a pioneer, but I built, and it must be said in the public forum, I renewed the concept that was actually formed by Mr. Martins, who
Yes.
So it's not that I did this from scratch. Although he's no longer, I mean, he's very good at health, but he's no longer with us. The credits must not be attributed just to me. That's the first thing. I think, again, not wanting to run away from your last question, I would rather answer this in the light of my Mozambican industry hat rather than as a player in the global market.
Sure.
Because I could, basically do a lot of poetry and speaking about what I would change in the global market, but that's not really for me. I think that for us, Mozambique, a very hands-on thing is really, a turnaround, as I said, on the mindset, from looking and speaking of the local cashew industry You know, as an exporter, where you have an industry which is a nice to have and it's cool to speak of and to take some pictures, so on and so forth, to really the catalyzing force of the sector of cashew in Mozambique, rather than just exports. Because I really think that, you know, we have everything to make it work. You know, we have the technology, we have the entrepreneurs, or if we don't have them, we'll soon have them again. You know, we have the production, we have the ports, we have the market. So it's a matter of the people. You know, it's not, the fundamentals are here, and when the fundamentals are here, then it's up to us to really make it happen, I think.
Thank you. It does always come down to the people.
Yes.
Absolutely right. Gonzalo, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. And it's nice to hear some insights on the developments in Mozambique. Thank you for joining us today. We're right up
Thanks
against
so much for the invite.
We're right up against our time limit, everyone. So I think we'll just leave it at that for today. It's 90 minutes. That's more than enough to be listening to us, I can tell you. So thanks everyone for joining us. Let me pass you back to Stella.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Gonzalo. It's been such an interesting and interactive session today. Jim, the next GME is for the 1st of October. What should we expect?
Well, following on from our interesting discussion with our two really, really interesting guests today, we're going to have a look at the developments in cashew processing in African countries. So we're going to take a kind of a pan-Africa look at how processing has developed, why it's taken off in some places and not in others, and where it might be going. So I think this year has been a positive year for African cashew processing. How positive and where it's going next year, that's what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks' time. But before I go back to you, Stella, let me just thank our two guests, Lucia Antonio, Gonzalo Correa, fabulous guests, very, very open and transparent answers to the questions. It's been a pleasure. Thank you both very much indeed. And if there's anything we can ever do for you in information or anything else, just don't hesitate to ask. Thanks to everyone else for participating. Look forward to chatting with you in 2 weeks. Back to you, Stella.
Thank you, Jim. Let me add my voice to yours to say thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Gonzalo. And thank you, Jim, one more time. Let me also use this opportunity to thank our partners and sponsors, the European Union, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, the GIZ Movecom Cashew, the Sustainable Nut Initiative, and the Cashew Club. Note that all Global Market Encounter sessions with Jim Fitzpatrick are available on the ACA YouTube channel at African Cashew A, where you could watch all the recordings anytime. Important information, mark your calendars. The 19th ACA Annual Cashew Conference and Expo will take place from November 18th to 21st of this year at Jinek in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and early bird rates end on November 30th, so hurry up. Until the next 2 weeks, enjoy the 30 minutes networking discussion in the Q&A box. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Stella. Thank you, Jim. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.